Okay, let's grab a seat. As you see, we kind of roped off some of the sections to get everybody up front. Probably not going to be any empty seats. Okay, that's fine. Jump in. Let's grab a seat. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you guys made it here. I see some familiar faces from this morning's workout in the audience. We had an amazing workout this morning with Dr. Colgan, and he shared some secrets to our core, some of the influences on our circadian rhythm. And wow, was that great? Who was here this morning? Show me some hands. Yeah, right on. So any little ab feeling going on yet? I mean, I kind of feel a little tension going on. So we did a pretty good job, or he did a pretty good job of working us out. We all sweat together this morning. That was a lot of fun. So my name's Ken Close. I'm from right here in Spokane. Yay. Welcome our Spokane peeps. Who's from out of town? Wow. From where? Give me a shout out. Montana? Anybody from Montana? Montana? Okay. So we got some Montana in the house. Right on. The rest of everybody's closer. Moscow, Idaho. Right on. All right. So I get the honor today of introducing kind of my mentor and the guy that's it's his fault for my transformation. I've had some pretty decent results basically following his principles in some of the books that he's got out there. I first met Dr. Colgan in May of 2012 and his lovely wife Leslie at an event over in Seattle. So I've been kind of following him for a couple of years now. I probably have most of his books. Well, not all of them, but I've got a few of the good ones. And I got a little cheat sheet here because if I don't follow that, I might give him superhuman powers and the speed of Flash Gordon and, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to kind of stick to what is real. He's kind of my mentor. So Dr. Colgan, he's got a PhD. He's internationally renowned research scientist. He is acknowledged as one of the foremost experts in inhibition of aging. Dr. Colgan is chairman of the Colgan Institute, and the Institute is a consulting and research facility concerned with the effects of nutrition and exercise on athletic performance, the inhibition of aging, and improvement of the human brain function. So he served as a consultant in the U.S. National Institute of Aging and to the American, Canadian, and the New Zealand governments. So in his 50-year career, he has consulted for the largest nutritional companies worldwide. So in 2011, Dr. Colgan joined the Isogenics Scientific Advisory Board. In 2012, he was elected a fellow of the American College of Nutrition. He's written 2 college texts and 24 books for the public, including 2 bestsellers. His recent book, Save Your Brain, is now in its 3rd printing. And his 2 latest books are The Anti-Inflammatory Athlete, which I own, released in March of 2012, and Quiet Mind, which I own, released in 2013. And all these books are available through order through Sound Concepts, and we have some of his books right here, which you can also get his autograph. So definitely take advantage of that. So with that, and I would like to everybody give a heartfelt, warm welcome to Dr. Michael Colgan.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll get right to it. Nutrition and exercise on athletic performance. What else is there? That's the whole thing. I've worked with some top athletes. Here's just a couple of them. Worked with Sammy when he broke the world marathon record and won the marathon. I worked with Shane when he became the world sprint cycling champion. Just a few. I've worked with a lot of athletes, so I have the privilege of seeing exceptional talents and knowing what the brain is capable of, what the body's capable of. And a lot of the athletes are pictured and some of the things they've said, some of the nice things, not the terrible things, about me in this book, The Anti-Inflammatory Athlete. Now, the body is designed to very strict rules. We because of our language, we think we're free, but we're not. And I want to give you this example. The cochlea in the head transmits sound. It transmits sound in a particular way through its design to the Fibonacci series of math. Fibonacci series is one of the natural series that occurs throughout the universe. And we are designed to that series because we are actually only composed of burned rock, the debris of exploded stars, plus water and oxygen. Those are our constituents. And therefore, if you are going to look at the performance of an athlete, you have to look at how we are designed. Now, that design of the cochlea is such that it hears the purest sound. So if you are going to design something to produce the purest sound, it should be to the same design. And Antonio Stradivari found that out in the 17th century. Stradivarius violins are designed strictly to the Fibonacci series. And they produce the purest sound, which then resonates in the Fibonacci design of our ear. And that really describes everything. If we depart from that by even the tiniest bit, like for instance, Antonori, who designed violins, didn't do it to the same thing. And what's happened to our nutrition is it's been taken over by the dark side. It really has. We no longer have nutrition that's worth looking at. I've been very privileged here to go to organic restaurants in town, and it's wonderful to do so. But the majority of the food that we get is not that way at all. The majority of the food we get has been completely destroyed, just as if it was Jabba the Hutt. I cannot believe the conditions, for example, under which pork is raised in the United States, where pigs are put in vertical columns, and the feces of the pig above drops on the one below, and they stand on bars all their short life and are fed. And it is filth beyond imagining. Yet when you buy a ham steak or a ham bone at the deli, it looks beautifully clean. This is what we've done to a natural animal. And it's the same with poultry. The majority of poultry is battery raised, and in cages that are so small that the hens that are laying hens can't even turn around, so that their bum sticks out the back and the eggs drop automatically onto a rubber conveyor belt. And that's what we've done to the food. We have created abominations in the face of creation. We have created abominations, and we call it food. And I think the Jabba the Hutt sort of metaphor is a good one. And then in our air and our water and our food, industrial toxins are rampant. They're all over the place. I've just got an example here. The American Lung Association State of the Air report in 2011 shows that the EPA, which was created in 1976 to clean up everything, has failed miserably. And we've got 154 million Americans living in toxic air, worse than at any previous time in history, including the worst days of the Industrial Revolution. And the toxins travel from industry into your home, into your lungs, into your brain. This is not part of what we should be doing for athletes. And if you allow it to happen to you, there's no magic bullet. You have to learn to protect yourself. Now, when we examined athletes in Encinitas, California, that went to UC San Diego, they were living on the coast. They were eating clean. They were eating organic food. They were doing everything, training every day, running on the seacoast. When we measured their sweat by putting sweat bags on their back, it was full of toxins. It was so full, I thought we were doing the assays wrong or something. So I rang my friends of mine at the University of Chicago, and they said, "There are your results? You should see ours. Ours are much worse." So and that occurs because athletes and people who exercise regularly, they take in 12 to 20 times the air of sedentary people. And so they take in 12 to 20 times the toxins in that air. And therefore they have more need to cleanse their bodies, to optimize the body's magnificent cleansing systems than average people. And that seems strange because they're supposedly more healthy, but they actually have a higher toxin load than the average sedentary person. And that's why I was interested when Isagenix had a cleansing system that was cheap, really, really cheap. Now I have to tell you, I have at my facility in Salt Spring Island, I have a cleanse week where people come for a week. And they live there, and it costs $10,000 per person. And after a few years of doing it, I realized it is next to useless, because they go back to their own environment, all nicely cleaned up, and then within a couple of weeks, the toxins are all back in again. You have to have a system that you can use continuously that costs pennies to use, and Isagenix is one of the few systems I found that's like that. And so I was very interested in it, and then I examined what was in it, and it was the same system basically that I used myself, using bentonite clay in one of the pills, and but the same botanicals in the Cleanse for Life, the same formula overall that Hippocrates used 2,000 years ago. And I wanted to see what that was like, and I went to the British Museum in London, and I took photographs of the bentonite clay tablets that are there, because that was the same bentonite that is used today in as part of the Isagenix system. And bentonite, by the way, is one of the biggest cleansers in the whole industrial scene. It cleanses everything. It doesn't absorb toxins. It adsorbs them. It is an electromagnetic attraction which gathers toxins and holds them. But then you have to have a system to. What happens is your cleansing systems of the liver and kidneys and lymph take the toxins and put it into your liver, and your liver then puts it into your bile duct, and the bile duct puts it into your intestines, and then you have the bentonite that takes it out of the intestines before it can be reabsorbed. And it's a brilliant system, and Hippocrates thought it up very long ago, very long. So I'm quite keen on it, and I have to tell you that Isagenix is now, I've kept on, and I think other people on the Scientific Advisory Board have too, saying we've got to have some proof of this. Proof. So right now, Isagenix is measuring the output of toxins from the human body using the cleanse system. And believe me, it's a lot more complicated than you would think. A lot more complicated. I mean, if you just take chlorinated biphenyls, for example, PBDs and PBCs, with the amount of chlorine in them determines whether or not they will be passed easily into the cleansing system of the body. The ones with the high levels of chlorine, they are stuck. They're very hard to get out of your brain and out of your body. Ones with low levels of chlorine, they will come out. Other ones, they get converted to something else when they come out. So you can imagine it's a nightmare to try and measure them. But we're doing it, and that's the important thing. We're doing the research that is going to be publishable in peer-reviewed journals, and that's what we want. And so that's why so keen on it. Now then, after we talk about removing the toxins, the next thing to know is that every working unit in your body is a protein. All working units are proteins. Your hemoglobin is a protein, your enzymes are protein, your genes are proteins, your brain cells are proteins. They're all different proteins. They're all made to exactly the same code. As far as we know, it is the only code that exists in the universe, and it determines the shape of a flower, the shape of your hand, which incidentally is very much a Fibonacci number. And right down in the center of your cells, there is a little castle, you might say. A little castle, and DNA lives inside this castle. Now, we didn't fully appreciate that in 2003 when we characterized human DNA. We thought that the DNA did a lot. It doesn't do anything. DNA is a code book. That's all it is. It's locked forever in the nucleus. It is not active in the human body at all. It takes a little scribe called RNA, ribonucleic acid, to write out the codes and toss them out the window. It tosses them out the window and they float down into the cytoplasm of the cell. And there, in the cytoplasm of the cell, there are a large number of chefs in little boats waiting to take the codes to cook up all the proteins that you need. And believe me, that's a large number of chefs. We used to think it was around about 100,000, but the Proteome Project now shows that it's about 350,000 different proteins. 350,000 different proteins. And they make up all your bones, all your brain, all your blood, everything. And they're made from the protein that you eat. So if the quality of the protein is a battery-fed pig, that's the quality of the cells that you're going to get. That's it. There's no way around it. There's no way you can say, well, my body will make a better protein than the proteins that I eat. It won't. So it's very important that you get the quality protein, the highest quality you can find. And I knew this back in the 80s when I was working with athletes, and I started working on the New Zealand proteins because they were still grass-fed and they were fed in season and they weren't forced, and really they were a non-entity in terms of commerce. They were still in the way that farming used to be done. And in 1993, I wrote a little book recommending that particular protein, the whey protein concentrate. And I can tell you, if you want to ask questions afterwards, why that's better than isolate, why it's better than branched-chain amino acids by themselves, why it's better than a casein, etc. But we tested an awful lot of proteins, every protein you can think of. I mean, some of the worst were so bad. I mean, we tested soybean proteins of all kinds to the extent that sometimes we had to evacuate the laboratory. Because soy proteins have a particular effect. But we came to the conclusion that unless you have the highest quality protein, your body is never going to be able to express its DNA power. Never. Never. You'll go through your whole life and be unable to express the power. That is the key thing you have to do. You have to say to yourself, what is my body made of? Because if I put inferior protein into it, then I'm going to get an inferior body. I can't do anything else. If I have an inferior body, the inferior cells cannot express the power of my DNA. And that power is, I used to think it was limited. I no longer think it is limited. I've seen such things happen in athletics that I no longer think it is limited. And so it takes a particular type of nutrition and searching for particular things. And I'm glad to see that a lot of people in isogenics are interested in organic foods, in grass-fed meats, in wild meats, in wild fish, and things that take us a little bit back to where we used to be, a little bit. Not very far, believe me. If you think and you go to a restaurant and you eat organic vegetables, that you're getting the vegetables that existed 500 years ago, you are not. You are getting cultivars that have been continually changed since then, And the best you can get with heritage seeds is ones that are about 100 years old. So we're very far from the natural diet that we had on which our DNA developed. Now some people have said to me, but the DNA has changed over the last 10,000 years of agriculture. Well, that's not true. The DNA takes approximately 50,000 years to make a major change, and we have made a major change in our environment. So the closer you can get to the diet of 50,000 years ago, the better you are going to be able to express your DNA. Now, when I first came up with this hypothesis, I wrote to 5 of the world's top scientists, and one of them was Stephen Hawking, whom I followed for many, many years, the astrophysicist from Oxford University. And I wrote to him and said, do you think it's reasonable for me to say there's been no significant change in human DNA in the last 10,000 years? And he said, look on page 165 of my book, The Universe in a Nutshell. On page 165 it says there has been no significant change in human DNA in the last 10,000 years. So maybe I got it from there, I don't know. It's nice when some of the great minds of the world, all 5 of them wrote back to me and said that's absolutely true. There's been very little change at all. So in my book, Nutrition for Champions, I talk about a Paleolithic diet. Now, the Paleolithic diet has become so popular that many, many variations on it are now published, and it's gone way away from where it used to be. So anyone who is interested, I will send them the original papers that came out in the New England Journal of Medicine on the Paleolithic diet, because those are the ones you should stick to, because those are the only ones that have some real proof behind them. Well, I didn't really believe that the protein was still there. So I went to New Zealand in 2012 to find out. So we drove through 100 miles of cows feeding on the grass. And I was so pleased to see they were still there, that nobody had come in and said, let's make this really economic. Let's put them in batteries and feed them chicken feathers, which is one of the legal cow foods in the United States. Just think, if your cows are fed on chicken feathers, the quality of the protein that is in their meat and in their milk that then becomes you. You become an output of chicken feathers. And there's no way around it. We love to think there's a way around it. So that's why I'm very pleased to support the Isoline Pro. I fought for it coming out, and then I fought for a long time to get an NSF approval on it, National Standards Foundation, so that Olympic coaches and professional coaches and trainers can recommend it without question, because it's now NSF approved. Now, if you buy it with the NSF label, it costs you $3.25 more than if you buy it without the label. But I can assure you it's exactly the same thing. So it is a very good basis for, to start an athletic program, to say you must have your protein right first, because every working unit in your body is a protein. Every single unit is a protein. There are no working parts of the body that are not proteins, and they're all different, 350,000 of them. Now, another thing that we have partially destroyed in our system is we have removed the necessity to go to bed when it gets dark. Used to be that we stumbled about in the dark, but now we've created artificial light. In the last 100 years it's got very bright, and that very brightness disturbs our circadian rhythm. In fact, I know a large number of people who go to bed with their cell phone. And the cell phone has just the actual wavelengths to destroy your melatonin rhythm and disrupt your sleep. Same with using your computer in bed. In fact, if you want to use your cell phone in bed, there is now an app called F-Lux, which changes the background radiation of your cell phone so that it no longer interferes with the circadian rhythm. It's a very good idea. Because sleep, without sleep, I've got on my website, Facebook site, I've got an article detailing some of the studies. There are many, many of them showing that all athletic performance of every kind declines dramatically if you remove just 1 hour of sleep per night. 1 hour. Now that's a terrible thing for coaches and trainers. And I've had some high school coaches ask me about it and say, is it really important? Because I've got to get my athletes up at 6 a.m. because you see, I can only have them from 6 to 8, then they start classes. And I said, well, if you never want them to perform optimally, you'll continue to do that. If you want them to actually express their potential, then you won't do it. Because maybe once or twice you can get up early and get away with it. But if you do it continually, first of all, it disrupts performance. But secondly, it disrupts recovery and growth. So that the athlete may go through several seasons of partial sleep deprivation and be permanently unable to reach their potential. And that's a terrible thing. So the problem is that you get so many circadian rhythms in your life. And the human brain is completely synchronized to light, completely synchronized. The melatonin rhythm is only one of the rhythms that everybody knows, the sleep-wake cycle. But all of your hormones, the way your fat is deposited, the way the body treats a calorie, everything is determined in a 24-hour cycle. We know now of more than 1,000 rhythms that exist. And in the last few years, it's been shown that there are not only a little clock in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the brain, which times your sleep and wake cycle, but there are clocks in the liver, in the spleen, in the kidneys, in the gut. Very, very similar clocks, and they're all synchronized with the one in your brain. And so when you disrupt the one in your brain, you disrupt all of the functions of the body, everything, from your hormone output to your heart rate. So it's something that we've taken for granted, that we can be in this artificial light and we can go on through some of the dark hours and it doesn't matter. Well, if you want to perform optimally, you make sure it matters. And I have this rule. I want athletes, if they can be, to be in bed for 9 hours every night. And we've had some stunning results just from that change, going from 6 hours to 9 hours in bed. Doesn't matter whether you're actually sleeping all the time, but it gives you the opportunity. And some of the things, this is just a few of the functions, like our highest testosterone is at 9 a.m. in the morning. So from about 6 to 9, testosterone rises. So for males especially, you are more anabolic at that time than any other time in the day. So if you want to build muscle, that's the best time. And then your highest, if you want to train for skills, your best coordination, your fastest reaction time, your best balance, a whole lot of things are best from about 3 to 6 p.m. in the afternoon. So if you want to train for those things, then that's the time to train for them. Now people say, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, if you want optimum performance, it does matter. And I can tell you from the point of view of someone who has taken average athletes and over 5 to 8 years, because that's what it takes, have made them world champions. World champions. And that's why I now think there is no limit, because I have seen such remarkable changes in people that had no particular talent. They weren't born fast. They weren't born strong. And I don't know if there's a limit. it sounds as if we know a huge amount about this. We are absolutely nibbling away at the edge of the unlimited. We're sort of little mice nibbling on the edge of the cookie. The cookie is huge. We're finding things out, but very slowly by trial and error. And when you only get a certain amount of chance, because the melatonin rhythm starts to drop. You can see here, about 20 years of age, it starts to drop. By the time you're 40, your ability to express your optimum function is gone. So if you're age 25 now, you've got maybe 10 years in which you can get to your optimum function. After that, it's fighting to maintain it. It's like the sprinter. The sprinter runs his fastest for the first 60 yards and then spends the last 40 yards trying to maintain his speed because he's used up his ATP. And he's now gone on to a system of energy called the ATP-CP shuttle. And there's no way around that. And therefore, because the ATP-CP shuttle produces energy in a slower manner, then he can only move slower. So the last 40 yards of the 100-meter sprint is a fight to keep your speed. And it's the same with your performance after age 40. It's a fight to keep it. So you can still do things. But I love to get athletes when they're 14 or 15 years of age, because I know I've got a chance to make them a champion. Well, because of two things. One is optimizing the brain function, and the second one is optimizing the circadian function. I developed, in 2003, I developed the first one of this brain boost and sleep support. At that time, it was very expensive. I think our first year that we did it with athletes, the actual supplement cost over $100,000, and we only used about 10 athletes. But then I spent some time working for Big Pharma, and they put a couple of $1 million into the development, into the summation of controlled trials around the world. And because it was a government money, it had to be published so anybody could use it. So when I went to Isogenics, they couldn't stop me from taking all that material and saying, well, I've got all this stuff. Here it is. 10,000 different trials have been analyzed. Here are the meta-analyses. These are the supplements. These are the nutrients that we can use. And so we developed the brain boost and sleep support on that basis. And I just want to come back to this figure again a little bit, because the importance of it is not just to maintain your melatonin rhythm, or not just to optimize some of the neurotransmitters in the brain. The importance of it is to tie in, to synchronize your nutrition with the timing of the day. And I haven't got the time tonight to go into the various details of that, but you can see it again on my Facebook page. There's an article on timing of nutrition for optimum performance. And that's something that hasn't come out in the isogenics literature yet, but will. A lot of the material and a lot of the references are contained in my book, Save Your Brain, which came out in 2008. Now, the brain controls all your movements. Every single movement you make, from an eye blink to finger twitch, is controlled by the brain in this way. Axon potential goes to the muscle fiber. The muscle fiber then, through a very complicated process through the axon terminal, creates movement, literally movement, molecular movement, but it creates movement and takes a molecule of ATP, which then loses its phosphate and becomes ADP, and by that method it strikes the myosin actin chains to move them, and that's how a muscle works. And it all happens with the brain. Now, that's an important thing to know because athletes think, many of them think they can move without the brain moving. The brain has to move first before you can move a muscle. And if you see anyone with muscular dystrophy, you'll know that's true. The brain has to move first. So one of the things that I worked on since 2003 was increasing brain speed, because it is rarely the biggest or the strongest athlete that prevails. It is almost always the fastest. The fastest. So, and I have to say, I would not have been able to develop the brain boost and sleep support without the ISA Omega already being in the supplements. If it would have added a lot to the cost to have put it in separately. But this is a key element because the membrane, all the membranes of your cells are made from DHA. DHA does not come in any vegetable form. It only comes in animal form, and it's best produced by the sea. And so in the vegetable form, people say, oh yes, but omega-3s occur in flax oil and in walnuts and things. They do. But the body's ability to convert them to DHA is very limited. And we have found that, although I have, in many of my writings, recommended flax oil for use for omega-3s, they are at the lower end of the chain. They have many functions in the body, but they do not, very little of them gets to the brain. So get your DHA from the sea. And brain speed, as I said, determines performance. Brain speed is the biggest factor in the performance. And I learned this back in 1964, I saw Bruce Lee the first time in Los Angeles do a 2-inch punch in which he knocked over a 200-pound black belt karate instructor or martial arts instructor. And his punch moved 2 inches. And that was speed, because at his best, Bruce Lee was 5'7" and 135 pounds. He was one of the most powerful men that I've ever seen in my life. And I tried to get to him to help me train athletes, but I couldn't get to him because there were so many people wanting to do the same thing. But I got to his master, Master William Chung, and he taught me that it is speed that prevails. It's speed that prevails. And so the whole of the development of my brain boost has been focused on increasing brain speed. And we also looked at balance, decision-making, memory, and neurogenesis, that is the growth of new brain cells. And so it's a composite which does those things. But the brain speed was my major focus from 2003. And here's an example. We use Michael Merzenich's data, and we use the speed of auditory processing as a measure of brain speed. It's a pretty good measure. All the red dots on there are Merzenich's own data. And all the other colored circles with the arrows are my data. And if you look at the sort of orangey ones, you'll see that people's brain speed in every case has increased over a period of about a year. And when I showed these data to Suk Chow first, he said, well, we have to test it. And we have to test it independently of you using test that is not yours or Merzenich's. So they did a test at the University of Arizona, clinical trial of brain boost with 35 subjects for 6 weeks. And the results came back 33% faster decision making, and 19% improved memory, 33% improved balance, and 15% improved brain speed. Improved brain speed. So when these results came back, I thought this is sort of proof of concept trial number one. And Suk Cho and Jim Coover got together and looked at them and said, no, this is good enough. We're going to produce it. We're going to spend the money and produce Brain Boost and Sleep Support. And it came out in 2012. So since then, it's been a big success. And I'm pleased that we're going on with the research to develop it further. So I guess that covers some of the science that's behind isogenics. And we have had now several trials. One that was conducted by Christopher Roddy, independently of isogenics, and it was very successful, using a comparison between the isogenic system and the heart-healthy diet that's recommended by the American Medical Association. And it was so superior to the heart-healthy diet that isogenics decided when they did the publication they couldn't say recommended by the American Medical Association in case somebody got naughty about it. But that's the truth. I can say it. And then that did not have the second component. That had the nutrition component in it for weight loss, and it was very successful, especially with the loss of visceral fat, which is the most unhealthy type of fat. Do you know that you can get, by the way, when you see people who are quite heavy, you will see that their eyes bulge a bit. That's because they have pads of visceral fat behind the eyeballs. Hard to get rid of. So it builds up everywhere. Now we're doing a 12-month study with Dr. Paul Arciero at Skidmore College in New York. And so far it's been very successful, but we haven't published it. The preliminary results were given at the American Biological Association meeting this year. And the difference is we added the second component of performance, and that is training. These people are doing 5 workouts a week, and pretty hefty workouts, especially for people that initially enrolled because they were overweight. And so the mid results are spectacular, but we decided on the board that it would be better to continue the study for a year and knock it out of the park and then publish it. Because, you know, a year is only two turnovers of muscle cells. It takes 200 days for your muscle cells to turn over. But if you're going to permanently change your body, you've got to do anything you do at all, you've got to do it for at least 200 days. If you want to change your brain as well, you've got to do it for 400 days. So I'm trying to convince people that they should do these studies for 400 days. Well, of course, the limiting factor is cost. But thankfully, for everybody here, Isogenics is prepared to spend that sort of money on trials that nobody is requiring them to do. Nobody is requiring this. This is what they decided to do because they believe in what Isogenics stands for. And I applaud that heartily. I think everybody should applaud it. So, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that is the adaptogens. Adaptogens are strange beasts. Of the 40,000 plants that are used in medicine, there are only 12 plants that are considered adaptogens. And when I first saw Ionic Supreme, it had most of them in it. And I said to Jim Coover, you cannot produce this for this price. You just can't do it. And he said, well, you'll have to ask John. So I went to John Anderson's lab and looked at what he was doing and how he made the extractions and how he scaled them up. And it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. There is nothing on the market that is like Ionic Supreme. And that's because it came from Breckman's laboratory at the University of Moscow, and Jim Coover went over there in 1991. He told me all about this. He said, I went over and I had these money belts underneath my clothes. He said, I was scared that they were going to search me. I was going through security. said, he said I had $100,000 on my person. Because at the time, the Soviet Union was starting to break up, and these programs were being cut. And Breckman wanted to get out, and Jim Coover actually enabled him to get out of Russia. And in return for all the information that he had been accumulating and all the research that he'd done on adaptogens. And that's why the Ionic Supreme is so good. So there's no other company out there that I know that even has got any leverage like that in producing a supplement. And I have to say that my own training came from two great men, Bill Bauman, who was the athletics coach at Eugene, Oregon, University of Oregon, who then later on in his life started Nike. Nike was sort of a success, I think. And Arthur Lydiard, who was deemed the coach of the century by Runner's World. He had more Olympic winners than anybody else in running. So those are two great men that I have to acknowledge that are both passed now, but they gave me the inquiring mind to realize that we know very little. We know very little. And we have to keep on inquiring and learning, because it's a big bicky out there, but it takes a lot of knowledge to crack it. So, from my own perspective, I was training pretty hard for a different sport entirely. I was training for Grand Prix as an equestrian. And I went to William Chung, and I just got accepted by Hap Hansen, who was then world champion, and he was in San Diego. And I went into the dojo and I stepped onto the mat and I said, Master, I just got accepted. And boof! He hit me. I didn't even see it coming. And then so I got up and I said, but Master, boof! And I'm on the floor again. He said, have you forgotten everything? You know, you don't go into the dojo with your shoes on. Have you forgotten everything I taught you? You are the mountain. You are indestructible. Get up. So I got up very carefully, you know, in a horse stance with my arms like this, waiting for the third blow. And he came over and he patted me on the shoulder. He said, go on, go. Well, that stood me. I remembered that. I remembered that. In 2006, I was training for Grand Prix riding, and I made a mistake, and my horse shied at a jump, which was set at 5'6". And I came down on the top of one of the stanchions, and it went right through my pelvis. And that ended my ever career. I woke up in hospital, and with my doctor there saying, this is pretty bad. And my dear wife then kept me, I was paraplegic, and she had to roll me over in bed and everything. And the Canadian medical system said, this is not, we can't deal with it. We can give you a wheelchair. And my wife took me to a specialist hospital in Belgium where I had surgery. And I came back, I still couldn't walk for a year. And I was just like a stick. When I came out of hospital, I was 109 pounds. I couldn't walk, and so I went back to my job with Big Pharma, where I just essentially sat on my duff all day, taking pain pills and working on the computer. And nothing, of course, came of that, because there's two components. There's nutrition and there's training. You've got to do both of them. And one day my wife, I was complaining about the pain and everything, said, well, why don't you get up off your ass and do something? So I got up and I walked to my gym, which is probably 100 yards from my house. And I crawled up the stairs because I couldn't climb stairs. And I lay on the floor and I started doing Pilates type of exercise with the cable machine. And I kept thinking, you are the mountain. You are indestructible. You are the mountain. You are indestructible. And I kept that up for 2 years. 2 years. And it's true. You are the mountain. You are indestructible. So whenever you're down, whenever things are not going well for you, even in your training and everything, just think of that. I am the mountain. I am indestructible. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Hey, wow. Anybody find that interesting? Any information in there you can use? We've got a few minutes, and what I'd like to do, if we could, is field a couple of questions from the audience. And so I saw a bunch of people taking notes, diligently writing things down and taking pictures, and so out of that, I'm sure there's something that maybe you didn't get clarification or have a little question about. So let's open it up. Anybody have a question? I've got a mic, so let's get these questions answered. Shelley?
Can you explain the adaptogens again in the isogenics?
Yes, there's about 12 plants that have a very peculiar effect. They're not stimulants and they're not depressants. They appear to optimize the normal function of particular units in the body. One of the most well-known, of course, is the Chinese plants, the ginseng, Panax ginseng. Now, you'll notice that Panax ginseng is not in the adaptogens. One of the reasons for that is it would send the cost over the moon. I went to the one or two of the farms in Kelowna, just in Canada, just not far from where I live, and you can buy roots there of ginseng for about $10. But the really good roots, the wild-crafted roots that are 7 or 8 years old, they're more than $100 each. And when they have the auction, some of them go up to $1,000. So there's obviously a lot of interest in ginseng, but that's one of the most well-known. And I have to say that some athletes who made a lot of money from their endeavors that I had been training, some of them bought big bags of ginseng roots, big bags like this, and they would eat one a day as if it was going to make a huge difference. But it doesn't work like that. And none of the adaptogens do. They work very slowly over a long period of time. And they don't act as stimulants. They don't act as depressants. So there's only about 12 plants. And isogenics has got most of them.
Thank you. So, any other questions? Right on. Here, let me get the mic over here. Oh, you can maybe. Everybody else wants to hear you.
Hi. Okay, so with that being said, if they work over a long period of time, how come we feel it's so immediate with the ionics?
I think that feeling that you get, the feeling of exhilaration a little bit, I think it's probably due to the very fine extraction processes of John Anderson. Because there are many on the market that you would buy and take and you won't feel anything from them. But John has got some amazing equipment and amazing procedures that he doesn't even like photographed. Okay.
Could it also be the beads that are in there, the B vitamins are in the ionics?
No. No. Yes.
All right. Yep.
So the question I get asked a lot from athletes and trainers is, why do you think your isogenics protein is really all that different and really all that superior? And what is it about the system in total that really makes such a difference?
What was the second part?
Well, basically starting with the protein first, but the whole system. Just hearing from you again, I've heard you talk about this, but why is isogenics so different than anything else that's out there in the market?
Well, one reason is I would say that more than 50% of all of the companies that do this are Me Too companies. They go in and copy, because there are no patents on any nutritional product, they reverse engineer it and copy it. And they then come out and say all sorts of stories about it. And that happens a great deal. I have been a consultant to several companies where they didn't even want to know about the research. All they wanted me to do was to give them a formula. And that's crazy. Isogenics has a scientific team with more than 20 scientists. It has people on its advisory board like Wayne Bidlack and Harry Pruce and John oh gosh, I'm lost now. Bill Andrews, that you and me, you can look us up in the National Library of Medicine, and we have actually published some reasonable papers. If you look up most of the nutritional companies, they may have 1 or 2 scientists. They may have. Usually they have 1, and usually it's because they're paying a university scientist a fat lump each year just to be on their board. And Isogenics doesn't do that. It doesn't. It operates quite differently, and I applaud that because it enables us to do some real research, and that's quite rare. Quite rare. I'll tell you something. I probably shouldn't say this, and it's probably not compliant to do so, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's a company that I did. I designed all of the products for USANA, all of them, for 5 years. Myself and John MacDonald, their chemist, he's a very good chemist. They did not do one single study of any kind to verify anything. That was one of my big beefs. And Isogenics has now got 3 published studies, and hopefully by next year it will have 4, and that's what we need. We need the peer-reviewed results in reasonable journals to show that the company is real. So I don't know if it answered your question, but there is a great difference. You know, I can talk about the difference in the protein because I've tested a lot of proteins. There's a very great difference between proteins that are produced from battery-fed animals and proteins that are produced with heat extraction or acid extraction, and proteins that are produced the way the Isogenics protein is produced. But that's a whole other discussion. And
A lot more time, right?
yeah.
Question.
Do you think, when is Isogenics going to go into the area of microbiome study like we had talked about? With the whole microbiome body?
Well, microbiome is as you've studied it, I know, and it's a difficult project because it was not until 2006 that it was even a project. And now we have discovered that the resident bacteria in your gut, which is about the same weight as your brain, have more active genes than we have ourselves. And they all interact with our genes. And so if you disturb your gut flora and fauna, you're going to disturb everything in your life, including your brain. The brain-gut axis is very active. Anything that happens in your gut is transmitted to the brain by a special set of nerves. So these things are fairly recent discoveries, and there are many hypotheses about how we're going to control this. And there are companies, of course, that have been doing it with probiotics for 30 or 40 years. And until recently, they were not given a lot of credibility by the health authorities. And I was very pleased to see that one of the companies whose probiotics I recommend, called Lallemand in Canada, is now supported by the Canadian government, and it actually was allowed last year to make 4 health claims on its probiotic. So, Lallemand. Lallemande. It came originally from Paris, and there have been several companies that have spun off it, but the original company was in Toronto and Ottawa. So It's now much bigger, and it's a quasi-government organization. So that means that some serious scientists, even old and crusty scientists, who are usually the ones that decide, have decided that this is real science.
So there's on Dr. Colgan's Facebook page, I believe you just put out a little bit about why you chose isogenics.
Oh, yes. I thought I was going to be covering that tomorrow.
Yeah, well, we could, in terms of access to that, he's mentioned his Facebook page, and we can also go and take a look at a lot of those.
Yes, you can. I've written it up, why I did so, and I'm very pleased I have. One of the major things, of course, is the culture. The culture of isogenics is like that of no other company I have ever worked with. And I've been continuously working for the last 54 years. So, and I've worked for a variety of companies. So I'm very pleased to have found this culture of friendship that has been wonderful for my life and the life of my family.